Hi guys, Olive here. Today I'm here to bring you my April 2016 wrap-up, tell you what I'm currently reading, and then tell you what I'm planning to read for May 2016. My life was absolutely insane during the month of April, so I have no idea how I managed to finish 11 books. I take that back. Genrethon and Dewey's had a little bit to do with that. The first book I finished during the month of April was The Winter's Kiss by Rutkoski, which is the third and final book in the Winter's trilogy. I obviously can't say too much about the plot of this book because it is the third book in this series, but this book was absolutely fantastic. The second book that I loved so much left off on an insane cliffhanger, and the first third of this book was absolutely heartbreaking, but then it turns into this adrenaline-filled, heart-pounding story that I just could not put down. This is a YA series, but it is a very political series. There is a lot of war and strategy. There are political relations between different nations, ethnic tension, colonialization, issues with slavery. Rutkoski does make it very palatable, but I would say the series probably wouldn't be for you if that kind of thing doesn't interest you. I ended up giving this one 4.5 stars. I did not like it as much as the second book in the series, which will always have my heart, but I really enjoyed how the series wrapped up as a whole. Then I managed to finish 3 different books from 3 different genres during the week of Genrethon. Genrethon was a readathon hosted by Brittany from Under the Radar Books, Lauren from Lauren in the Books, Joss from Schools Reads, and Kristen from Vienna Waits Books. I was juggling a lot of different books from a lot of different genres this month, so I had a feeling I might be able to finish 3 during that week, and I was able to. The first book finished during Genrethon was Guns, Germs, and Steel, The Fates of Human Societies by Jared Diamond. This is a very dense but very, very informative nonfiction book. I did a full review of this book, and I will link it for you down below if you're interested in seeing it. The second book I finished for Genrethon was H is for Hawk by Helen Mcdonald. This was a buddy read that I did with Kelly of What Kelly Reads. This is a really hard book to describe, but if I was going to try, I would say it's part grief memoir, parts T.H. White's biography, parts love letter to nature, and part hawk training guide. Helen Mcdonald, who has always had a love of birds and had trained birds previously, decides to raise a goshawk, one of the hardest birds to train, after her father suddenly dies. She takes comfort in reading a memoir by T.H. White, who was a famous writer who wrote a variety of works, including The Sword and the Stone. He was training his own goshawk and was writing about his experiences doing so. Helen really connected with that as she was training her own goshawk and felt an enormous amount of sympathy for T.H. White, who also seemed to be seeking some sort of personal fulfillment or trying to fill in some sort of hole in his life by training this hawk. This is definitely one of the quiet but really, really powerful books I have grown to love over the past year. I found it really moving, and it had such a sense of presence. Like, reading this was unlike anything I've ever read before. Her personality really shines through the writing. It's told in really choppy formats, which to me indicates how scattered her brain was and how much she didn't know what to do with herself after her father passed away. I also loved how the training of this hawk pulled her along through the grief process, and never once did it do the grief process outline of, denial, anger, all the way up to acceptance. This did not do that. It was way more subtle, and you saw how having the hawk forced her to go out into public, but then at other times forced her to go inside of herself and be more introspective. So it really just took you through that process of how she came to terms with her father's death. Both Kelly and I really connected with this book. I would highly recommend it. And then the last book I read for Genrethon, I enjoyed infinitely less than the other 2. That, unfortunately, was Emma by Jane Austen. I buddy read this one with a group of really awesome booktube ladies, coming off of reading Pride and Prejudice in February, which I absolutely loved, and the fact that this book served as inspiration for the movie Clueless, which I absolutely love. I thought I was going to adore this book, and I was really, really wrong. I really disliked this book, and it made me so upset that I disliked this book. The only thing I ended up liking about this book were the parts where I could see where Clueless took inspiration from. There was absolutely zero chemistry between the 2 romantic leads. The weather, specifically drafts coming through the house, could have been its own character, it was referred to so much. And every single character was insufferably rude, and not entertainingly so. And I watch reality TV, so I know the difference. I didn't end up saying much during the buddy read of this because I didn't want to seem like a massive suck who was just talking about how much they hated this book while everyone else seemed to be enjoying it. But hey, I can't help feeling what I feel. It will not stop me from picking up other Jane Austens, but I am going to take a little break from her work for a while. The next book I read was another audiobook called You Are One of Them by Elliott Holtz. I needed a new audiobook to listen to while I play Stardew Valley because that's what I've been doing with a lot of my time lately. The book follows two young girls who are growing up in DC, Sarah Zuckerman, who is the narrator, and then her friend who moves into the area when they're both children, Jennifer Jones. It's the early 1980s and Soviet tensions are pretty high, so both young girls decide to write a letter to Yuri Andropov, who was the leader of the Soviet Union at the time. Both of them send letters, but only Jennifer, who is kind of the golden girl, gets a response. She becomes a minor celebrity after that, and she's invited to the Soviet Union to come and take a tour. Really, it was just a method of Soviet propaganda to invite her and show her how great the Soviet Union was. Sarah doesn't understand why her letter was never answered. There was a little bit of jealousy with the celebrity that she got afterward. And then Jennifer gets a little bit of a big head because of her minor celebrity status, and they start to grow apart. Shortly thereafter, Jennifer Jones dies in a freak accident. Fast forward many years later when Sarah has grown into a young adult and she gets a letter from a Russian woman who says that she was Jennifer Jones's tour guide when she came over to the Soviet Union all those years ago. This is now during the 90s, and this Russian woman invites Sarah to come over to Russia to see all the things that Jennifer saw and to talk to her a little bit about her experience with Jennifer. This wasn't the best book I've ever read, but I ended up really connecting with it because a lot of the things that Sarah sees and experiences in terms of a foreigner seeing Russian culture for the first time was something that I really experienced when I went to Russia. Even something as simple as you can't buy Russians even numbers of flowers because that means they're going to have bad luck. You never get someone a dozen roses. It has to be 13 or 11. But just little things like that I already knew, and then to hear them in audiobook form just made me really happy. The narrator for it was pretty good. There are a lot of Russian words interspersed, and for most of them she did a good job, but for the ones where she didn't, it felt like my ears were bleeding. So I had a very unique experience with this book. Certain things that annoyed me would not annoy anyone else who didn't know anything about Russian culture or Russian language. But then I connected with it in a really unique way because I have those experiences. So yeah, it was a really special one. It made me really nostalgic to go back to Russia. So of course, now I want to plan my next trip there. Next were the books that I read for the Dewey's 24-hour readathon. I read White Magic Spells to Hold You by Kelly Easton, Twinkle Twinkle by Kaori Akuni, translated by Emi Shimokawa. And I read half of YT by Alexei Nikitin, which was translated by Anne-Marie Jackson, before I DNF'd because it just wasn't for me. I did a full wrap-up for Dewey's 24-hour readathon. I will also link that video down below if you'd like to hear my thoughts on any of the books that I read. Then for my A Grown Woman Finally Reads Harry Potter series, I read Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, number 4. I did a full and very sassy review of this one. That video will also be linked down below. Then I read this delightful book, As If, An Oral History of Clueless as told by Amy Heckerling, the cast and crew by Jen Chaney. This is a comprehensive history of the movie Clueless. The idea behind it, Amy Heckerling's passion to get it created, its casting, the production, its cultural impact, anything you can think of that has to do with the movie Clueless, this book covers it. This was an absolute joy to read. I really needed to pick me up after I did not like Emma, so of course I watched the movie. Then I was dying to pick this book up, and then the book had me so excited about the movie that I watched it again. I am not the biggest movie person, so that says something. This book has little tidbits that you would not hear about anywhere else about how they made Clueless. It talks about the actors who were up for specific parts, but then ended up not getting it. It talks about the locations that they had to use. It talks about how much fun the actors had with each other and just how well everyone got along. It talked about the way they went about developing the very, very specific fashion that exists in this movie and how that fashion then went on to essentially define the rest of the fashion throughout the decade of the 90s. This was so much fun. It made me so happy. I loved reading it. It makes me appreciate the movie even more. And then the last book I actually finished on May 1st, but I'm counting it for April because I was working on it throughout the entire month, and that was The Shadow of the Winds by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. This was translated by Lucia Graves, who happens to be Zafón's daughter. It took me a while to get through this book, not because it's not fantastic, which it is, but because it was stressing me out so much that I had to take very long breaks. This is about a young man named Daniel in Barcelona, in Spain, who as a young boy gets taken to what's called the Cemetery of Forgotten Books by his father, who is a bookseller. This Cemetery of Forgotten Books is where old books that have been lost or forgotten end up for safekeeping. The book he ends up picking is a book called The Shadow of the Winds by Julian Kodox. He reads this book, falls in love with it head over heels, tries to find more of this man's works, and finds out that someone has been systematically burning every single copy. This intrigues him enough that he tries to find more out about this author's life, and it leads him into this huge mystery. It involves forbidden love, a corrupt and insanely evil police officer, a colorful, hilarious, and womanizing former homeless man, and so much more. The atmosphere of this was so incredible. I really felt like I was in Spain the whole time. It's also set during and in between war times in the early 20th century in Spain, so you really feel that undercurrent of tension there. This is absolutely one I want to reread during a time where my life isn't so crazy, because I feel like I needed to take more breaks because of the stress than I normally would have because of all the stress that is already existing in my life. But this was so fantastic, probably one of my top reads of the year so far. So those are all the books I read in April. I am currently reading 4 different books. I, of course, am reading the 5th Harry Potter for the ongoing series I'm doing. I am still buddy reading East of Eden with Hillary from Your Robot Friends. Hillary has been incredibly patient with me. I have not had as much time as I have wanted to dedicate to this book, but we are slowly making our way through it and really enjoying it along the way. I'm reading a book I got on NetGalley called The Ecliptic by Benjamin Wood. I am not that far into this one, but I do know that it is set at an artist's retreat in Turkey. I really like the writing so far, so I'm really excited to keep going with it. And then also I am supposedly participating in RibSat right now. I have not really read any of the first book so far because I haven't had the time or energy to do so, but I am hoping to do so over the next few days with what's left of RibSats. I posted a TBR video. I'll link that for you if you're interested in seeing it, but the first book I've been working on is City of Savages by Lee Kelly. So in addition to those 4 books that I'm currently reading, I have some other plans for May. I'm going to be buddy reading The Almond Picker by Simonetta Agnello Hornby, translated by Alastair McEwen, with Liz from Now Voyaging. Since it's May, I thought it was fitting to read Snow in May by Ksenia Melnick. This is a collection of short stories, obviously having to do with Russia. Also relating to Russia, I want to read The Romanovs, the final chapter by Robert K. Massey. I have read all of Robert K. Massey's works about Russian historical figures, save for this one, and I'd really like to do an author profile on him. So I'm going to read this one so I can do that. This apparently is a big month for nonfiction for me because I'll also be reading Sex, Lies, and Handwriting by Michelle Dresbolds. And then if I have time, I'm thinking about reading A Gathering of Shadows by V.E. Schwab, which is the second book in the Darker Shade of Magic trilogy. So that's all of it. All the books I read in April, what I'm currently reading, what I'm going to be reading during the month of May. If you've heard of any of these books, read any of them, have any comments in general, you can leave it down in the comments section below. I'm also reachable in a variety of places in social media, and I will leave those links down below as well. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.